Kyoto, early 1600s. A young samurai gasped for breath during kata practice, muscles locked, vision swimming. His instructor barely glanced over. "Stiff as a corpse," he muttered. The samurai had trained every day for 3 years, pushed through pain, mastered technique. Yet he felt weaker now than when he started. Meanwhile, across Japan, Miyamoto Musashi walked thousands of miles on foot, fought over 60 duels to the death, trained daily with both sword and brush, and at 62 years old, still moved like water. Never sluggish, never depleted, never broken. How? Here's what the scrolls don't tell you. Your exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing it wrong. Musashi understood something modern science would only discover centuries later. The human body doesn't run out of energy. It leaks energy. The question isn't how to rest more. The question is, are you moving like Musashi or bleeding stamina with every tense muscle, shallow breath, and wasted motion? Chapter 1. The Paradox of the Tireless Samurai. Osaka, 1605. Young warriors filled the training grounds of the Yoshioka School, one of Japan's most prestigious sword academies. By midday, half had collapsed. Not from combat, from simple drilling. Rigid stances, clenched fists, held breath. Their bodies locked tight with effort, burning through energy like kindling. This was normal. Samurai training demanded intensity, discipline, unbreakable focus. But intensity had a cost. Records from the period describe warriors in their 20s with chronic pain, shaking hands, exhaustion that rest couldn't fix. Many died before 35. At the same moment, somewhere on the roads between provinces, Miyamoto Musashi walked, not on horseback, on foot. He carried one sword, one blanket, nothing else. He would walk like this for decades. He wasn't just traveling, he was training. Every step, every breath. His body in constant motion, yet never depleted. Accounts from those who met him describe something unusual. Musashi never looked tired. His shoulders hung loose. His spine stood straight. Even after hours of walking or fighting, his breathing remained steady, his movements fluid. This wasn't superhuman genetics. Musashi was human. He got injured. He aged. But he didn't burn out. Why? Most people assume Musashi had extraordinary willpower, that he simply pushed harder than everyone else, endured more pain, rested less. The opposite was true. Musashi wrote in the Book of 5 Rings, "Do not let your body be stiff. Use the whole body naturally." Not poetic philosophy, biomechanical instruction. While other samurai trained with tension, muscles clenched, jaws tight, breathing forced, Musashi trained with relaxation. He discovered that stiff muscles don't generate power. They leak it. Every moment of unnecessary tension drains you. Every shallow breath robs you of oxygen. Every rigid stance compounds fatigue. Musashi fought over 60 duels. Some lasted seconds, others minutes. In every case, witnesses described the same thing. His body moved without visible strain. One strike, clean and efficient. Then stillness. His opponents, by contrast, attacked with force. Shoulders bunched, faces red, movements jagged. They tired quickly. Musashi did not. This wasn't warrior spirit. Well, this was physics hiding inside physiology. Musashi had discovered something profound. Weakness is not a lack of strength. Weakness is wasted effort. You might be thinking, but I'm not a samurai. I don't fight duels. How does this apply to me? Look at your body right now. Are your shoulders tense? Is your jaw clenched? Are you breathing shallowly into your chest? That tension, right there, is leaking your energy. Not in battle, in this moment. Reading these words. Musashi's method wasn't about fighting. It was about controlling your own body so it stops draining itself. And he proved it worked. Not just in duels, but in everything. He walked thousands of miles without horses. He painted masterpieces requiring hours of steady hand control. He wrote philosophical texts in marathon sessions. He carved sculptures. He meditated for days. At 62, when most samurai of his era were long dead, Musashi was still training, still creating, still walking. The real question isn't how Musashi built energy. The question is, what was he doing with his body that others weren't? The answer lies in 4 interlocking systems he mastered. Systems you can see documented in historical records, eyewitness accounts, and his own writings. Posture, breath, movement, mind. Together, these created what we now understand as body control, a method of nervous system regulation and biomechanical efficiency that prevented fatigue before it could begin. Musashi didn't overcome exhaustion. He engineered his body to never experience it in the first place. And that engineering started with something deceptively simple: how he stood. Chapter 2. The Hidden Cost of Tension. Traditional samurai schools taught warriors to be hard. Training manuals from the Edo period describe the ideal stance: feet planted wide, knees locked, core muscles engaged continuously, fists gripped around the sword handle with maximum force. The philosophy was simple: a rigid body equals a ready body. Students held these positions for hours. Breathing became secondary. Instructors walked between rows of trembling warriors, striking anyone whose posture wavered. Pain was proof of discipline. This method produced skilled fighters, but it also destroyed them. Here's what those training manuals didn't explain. When you clench a muscle continuously, you trigger a chemical process. The muscle consumes oxygen faster than your blood can supply it. Without oxygen, these cells switch to anaerobic metabolism, a backup energy system that produces lactic acid as waste. Lactic acid accumulates in muscle tissue. It creates that burning sensation during intense exercise. In small doses, your body clears it quickly. But when tension is constant, when you train for hours with muscles perpetually clenched, lactic acid builds faster than it can be removed. The result? Chronic muscle fatigue, stiffness, pain that persists even after training ends. Samurai weren't recovering between sessions. They were compounding damage daily. But the physical cost was only half the problem. Continuous muscular tension sends a signal to your nervous system: danger. Your body interprets sustained muscle activation as preparation for threat. In response, it elevates cortisol and adrenaline, stress hormones designed for short-term survival, not long-term performance. These hormones sharpen focus temporarily, but they come with a price: elevated heart rate, constricted blood vessels, disrupted sleep, suppressed digestion. Samurai were living in a state of perpetual physiological alarm, not because they faced constant danger, but because their own training methods triggered the danger response, day after day, year after year. Records describe warriors in their late 20s with tremors, digestive problems, insomnia, and emotional volatility. Their bodies, trapped in chronic stress mode, were breaking down from the inside. This wasn't weakness of character. This was biology. Musashi saw through it. In the Book of 5 Rings, he wrote repeatedly about the importance of naturalness. Yes, not as philosophy, but as technical instruction. Hold the longsword with a rather floating feeling. Do not tense your body unnecessarily. In both large-scale and individual strategy, you must not be tense. These weren't motivational statements. They were corrections to the prevailing training method. Where others clenched, Musashi relaxed. Where others forced their breath, he let it flow. Where others locked their joints, he kept them supple. Witnesses who saw Musashi fight described something unusual. His face remained calm, no grimacing, no visible strain. Even in duels where his life hung on a single movement, his expression stayed neutral. This wasn't emotional detachment. It was muscular efficiency. A relaxed muscle can contract faster and more powerfully than one already under tension. When Musashi struck, he moved from a state of rest to full extension in a fraction of a second. Maximum power, minimal energy expenditure. His opponents, already tense from rigid stances and gripped swords, had to overcome their own tension before they could move. They were fighting their training as much as they were fighting Musashi. And tension doesn't just slow you down, it blinds you. When your body is rigid, your perception narrows. Your peripheral vision decreases. Your ability to read subtle movements diminishes. You become locked into prediction rather than reaction. Musashi trained to see everything without focusing on anything. That requires a body relaxed enough to redirect attention instantly, something impossible when every muscle is braced for impact. The principle is simple. Energy flows through relaxation, not force. Think of water. It moves effortlessly downhill, adapts to every obstacle, carves through stone over time, not through hardness, through persistence without resistance. Musashi moved like water. Other warriors moved like stone, heavy, inflexible, and eventually broken. This is why he never burned out. Not because he trained less intensely, but because he trained without leaking energy through unnecessary tension. He wasn't superhuman. He was efficient. And efficiency, compounded over years, becomes endurance. Compounded over decades, it becomes legendary. The samurai who collapsed in their 20s weren't weaker than Musashi. They were just holding their bodies wrong. Every single day, in every single movement, draining themselves one clenched muscle at a time. Musashi had found the off switch. And it started with something most warriors never even considered: how to stand without fighting yourself. Chapter 3. Musashi's Posture and Breath. Eyewitness accounts of Musashi from the early 1600s describe something observers found almost unnatural. He stood too easily. No warrior stance, no visible readiness. Just a man standing the way a tree stands, rooted but not rigid. One account from a spectator at the Ichijoji temple duel noted, his shoulders hung as if sleeping, yet his spine rose like a pillar. He appeared both utterly relaxed and completely present. This wasn't accident. This was architecture. Musashi had discovered that posture is the foundation of everything that follows. Modern combat sports emphasize stance, feet position, weight distribution, guard placement. Musashi focused on something deeper: spinal alignment. His writings describe holding the head straight and keeping the body stretched upward naturally. Not forced military posture with chest puffed out. Natural vertical extension, as if someone gently pulled a string from the crown of his head toward the sky. This alignment did something critical. It created space. When your spine stacks correctly, each vertebra balanced on the one below, your ribcage can expand fully. Your diaphragm, the dome-shaped muscle below your lungs, has room to descend during inhalation. That descent creates negative pressure. Air rushes in to fill the vacuum. Your lungs inflate from bottom to top, maximizing oxygen intake with minimal effort. This is diaphragmatic breathing. The way infants breathe before tension teaches them otherwise. Here's why it matters for endurance. Oxygen is fuel. Every cell in your body runs on it. When oxygen supply drops, performance collapses. Muscles fatigue. Vision narrows. Decision-making slows. Most samurai breathe shallowly into their upper chest, a pattern triggered by tension and maintained by rigid posture. This type of breathing uses only the top third of lung capacity. It requires more effort for less oxygen. Worse, shallow breathing signals stress to your nervous system. Short, rapid breaths from the chest are physiologically identical to panic breathing. Your body interprets this as emergency mode and responds accordingly. Elevated heart rate, heightened alert status, faster energy consumption. Musashi breathed differently. Accounts describe his breathing as barely perceptible even during combat. Not because he held his breath, but because each breath was deep and slow. His belly expanded slightly with each inhale, the visible sign of diaphragmatic engagement. Deep breathing from a properly aligned spine delivers maximum oxygen with minimum visible movement. It keeps heart rate stable. It signals safety to the nervous system even in dangerous situations. This is the paradox. Musashi could remain calm in lethal confrontations not through mental will alone, but through breathing mechanics that made calm the default state. His body wasn't fighting his mind. His posture supported his breath regulated his nervous system, and his nervous system allowed his body to function without interference. The biomechanics work like this. When you slouch or lean forward, your ribcage compresses. The diaphragm can't descend fully. You're forced to breathe with secondary muscles, the muscles between your ribs and the small muscles around your neck and shoulders. These muscles weren't designed for continuous breathing. Using them constantly creates chronic tension in the neck, shoulders, and upper back. That tension further restricts movement, which further limits breathing, which creates more tension. A downward spiral. One poor posture decision compounding into systemic fatigue. Musashi avoided this entirely through vertical alignment. Shoulders relaxed, hanging naturally from the skeletal structure rather than held up by muscle effort. Hips loose, allowing the pelvis to sit in neutral position. Head balanced, not jutting forward. This skeletal stack required minimal muscular effort to maintain, and because the muscles weren't fighting to hold position, they remained available for movement, for striking, blocking, stepping. Other samurai tired themselves just standing ready. Musashi conserved energy and stillness, so he had reserves for action. But posture alone wasn't enough. Musashi also understood breath timing. In the Book of Five Rings, he notes the importance of breathing in rhythm with cutting, not holding breath during strikes, a common error that spikes tension and blood pressure, but breathing continuously, letting exhalation coincide with extension. This technique appears in modern strength training as the power breath, exhaling during exertion to stabilize the core and maximize force output. Musashi practiced it 400 years ago, not from scientific understanding but from experimentation and observation. He tested what worked, discarded what didn't. Records show he could fight for extended periods while opponents gassed out within minutes. The difference wasn't cardiovascular fitness, it was oxygen efficiency. Proper breathing delivers more fuel, less metabolic waste accumulates. Recovery happens faster between movements. Heart rate stays controlled. Vision remains clear. Musashi didn't build a stronger heart. He built a system that demanded less from his heart in the first place. This is where the mysticism falls away. For centuries, people attributed Musashi's endurance to spiritual enlightenment, warrior philosophy, or genetic superiority. The truth is simpler and more accessible. He stood correctly and breathed deeply. Those two factors, spinal alignment and diaphragmatic breathing, created a physiological advantage that compounded across every minute of every duel, every mile of every journey, every hour of every day. Musashi wasn't transcending human limitation. He was optimizing human design. And that optimization started with the skeleton, continued through the breath, and expressed itself in movement. The subject we turn to next. Chapter 4. Movement without waste. Musashi walked across Japan multiple times during his life. Not on horseback, on foot. Thousands of miles over decades. Travelers who encountered him on the road noted something peculiar. He moved faster than expected, yet never appeared to hurry. One merchant's journal from 1615 describes meeting Musashi on the Tokaido Road. His steps were short, almost shuffling, yet he covered ground like a man twice his height. No wasted motion upward, only forward. This wasn't casual observation. This was biomechanical genius hidden in plain sight. Most people walk inefficiently. Watch someone walk down a street. Their head bobs up and down with each step. Their center of mass rises and falls in a continuous wave pattern. They're not just moving forward. They're also fighting gravity with every stride. Each vertical bounce requires energy. Energy to lift your body mass upward. Then energy to control the descent. Then energy to absorb the impact when your foot strikes ground. Multiply that across thousands of steps daily. The Leiji waste becomes massive. Musashi eliminated the bounce. Historical descriptions of his walking style mention smooth gliding motion and feet barely leaving the ground. He used short steps with a rolling action, heel to toe in continuous contact with earth, weight transferring fluidly from one leg to the other. This technique keeps your center of mass at constant height. No energy wasted lifting yourself. No impact stress on joints. Just horizontal translation, the only direction that matters for covering distance. Modern race walkers use this exact method, not because it looks graceful, but because it's the most energy-efficient way to move the human body across ground. Musashi discovered it through necessity. When you walk as your primary transportation for years, inefficiency becomes painful. Your body teaches you through feedback, joint pain, fatigue, blisters, and you adapt or suffer. He adapted, but walking was just the foundation. Combat revealed the deeper principle. Samurai sword technique traditionally emphasized power generation through muscular force. Students learned to drive strikes using arm and shoulder strength, then often raising the sword high overhead before cutting downward. Visually impressive, biomechanically wasteful. Raising a sword overhead requires you to work against gravity. Your muscles must lift the weapon's weight plus accelerate it upward, then reverse direction and accelerate it downward. The transition point at the top of the arc bleeds momentum, a moment where the sword briefly stops before reversing. That pause telegraphs your intention. It gives opponents time to react, and it exhausts you quickly because you're using muscle power to fight gravity in both directions. Musashi used gravity instead of fighting it. Accounts of his duels describe strikes that seemed to come from nowhere. No large preparatory movements, no overhead raises. One moment stillness, the next moment his sword connected with target. Yet he achieved this through rotation and alignment rather than force. Instead of lifting the sword high, Musashi kept it closer to center line and used hip rotation to generate speed. His spine acted as the axis. His arms merely guided the weapon through space, while his core and legs provided rotational power. Physics does most of the work in rotation. Once an object begins spinning around an axis, it wants to continue. You don't need continuous force, just the initial impulse and then steering. Additionally, Musashi aligned his skeletal structure behind each strike. Historical texts note he kept his wrists, elbows, and shoulders in line with his target at moment of impact. This alignment means force transmits through bone, not muscle. Bone doesn't fatigue. Bone doesn't require oxygen. You can deliver impact after impact using your skeleton as the load-bearing structure while muscles do minimal work. The contrast with conventional training becomes clear. Traditional samurai techniques used muscles as the primary force generators. Muscles tire. Within minutes of intensive striking practice, muscular power drops significantly. Technique deteriorates. Speed decreases. Musashi's method used muscles for positioning and timing, but relied on gravity, momentum, and skeletal alignment for power. These don't fatigue. He could strike with full effectiveness in the first second of a duel or the last minute. His opponents, meanwhile, weakened progressively as their muscles depleted. In the famous duel with Sasaki Kojiro in 1612, while witnesses described Musashi delivering a single strike with a wooden oar, an improvised weapon heavier and more awkward than a sword. Yet that strike killed instantly, not because Musashi was stronger than Kojiro, who was renowned for his technique, but because Musashi understood leverage and alignment. He let physics do what muscles cannot. This principle extended beyond combat. When Musashi painted or carved, he worked for hours without hand cramping, a common problem for artists. Records describe his brushwork as effortless, despite creating detailed masterpieces. Same principle, minimal muscular tension, maximum use of natural movement patterns. When you write by gripping the pen tightly and using only finger muscles, your hand fatigues quickly. When you relax your grip, support the pen through finger position rather than pressure. And move from your wrist and forearm, you can write indefinitely. Musashi applied this understanding to everything: walking, fighting, creating art. Every movement became an opportunity to eliminate waste. Here's what this means practically. Energy isn't created through effort. It's preserved through efficiency. Musashi didn't have more stamina than other samurai because he trained his cardiovascular system harder. He had more stamina because he spent less energy per action. A man who uses 10 units of energy per sword strike will exhaust after 100 strikes. A man who uses 1 unit per strike can continue for 1,000. The difference isn't strength, it's economy. Musashi wasn't generating energy. He was refusing to waste it, in every step, every strike, every breath, every moment. And that refusal became endurance. Chapter 5. Motion and the Nervous System. In 1604, Musashi fought a duel against the entire Yoshioka school, dozens of armed men ambushing him simultaneously. Historical records describe the attack. Swordsmen rushing from multiple directions, archers positioned in surrounding trees, the chaos of coordinated assault designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. Musashi survived. More than survived. He killed the school's young heir and escaped without critical injury. Witnesses described something that seemed impossible. Throughout the ambush, Musashi's expression never changed. No panic, no rage, no visible emotion at all. One observer wrote, "He moved through them like wind through grass, present but untouched." This wasn't courage. This was neurology. Fear is a chemical cascade. When your brain perceives threat, the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in your temporal lobe, triggers an alarm. This alarm activates your sympathetic nervous system, which releases adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream within milliseconds. These hormones have specific effects. Pupils dilate for better vision. Heart rate accelerates to pump more blood. Bronchial tubes expand for increased oxygen, and blood redirects from digestive organs to major muscle groups. This is the fight-or-flight response. Evolutionary design for short-term survival. But it comes with costs most people don't recognize. Adrenaline is metabolically expensive. It forces your body to burn glucose at accelerated rates. The energy surge feels powerful initially, but it depletes reserves quickly. And after the adrenaline crash comes profound fatigue, the exhaustion that follows intense fear or anger. Additionally, the heightened state narrows your focus. Peripheral vision decreases. Fine motor control deteriorates. You become locked onto the immediate threat, unable to perceive secondary dangers or subtle environmental changes. In a duel against one opponent, this might work. Against multiple attackers coming from all angles, tunnel vision becomes fatal. Musashi trained to prevent the cascade from starting. In the Book of Five Rings, he wrote extensively about maintaining what he called ordinary spirit in combat. Not pumping yourself up emotionally, not allowing fear or anger to arise. Treating a life-or-death duel with the same mental state you'd bring to ordinary daily activities. This wasn't philosophical posturing, as this was nervous system regulation. The Zen concept Musashi studied was mushin, often translated as no mind or empty mind. Not emptiness in the sense of thoughtlessness, but emptiness of emotional disturbance. A mind like still water that reflects everything without distortion. When water is agitated, reflections fragment. You can't see clearly. When water is still, you see perfectly. Musashi's mind remained still even when swords came at his throat. But how do you train emotional neutrality under lethal pressure? Evidence suggests Musashi used graduated exposure combined with breath control. He deliberately placed himself in increasingly dangerous situations while maintaining regulated breathing, the physical anchor that keeps the nervous system from escalating. Remember, your brain takes cues from your body. Rapid, shallow breathing signals danger, which triggers more adrenaline, which causes more rapid breathing. A feedback loop spiraling toward panic. Deep, diaphragmatic breathing signals safety. Even when external circumstances are objectively dangerous, controlled breathing tells your amygdala, "We're fine, no emergency response needed." This creates a contradiction in your nervous system. External threat plus internal calm. The system defaults to the stronger signal, and breath is a more direct input than abstract threat assessment. Musashi's writings emphasize breathing naturally and not holding the breath during combat. This wasn't advice for oxygen intake alone. This was instructions for nervous system control. By keeping his breathing steady, he prevented the fear cascade from initiating. No cascade meant no adrenaline dump. Thus, no adrenaline meant no tunnel vision. No fine motor deterioration, no energy depletion. The physiological advantages compound. Stable heart rate means consistent blood flow to the brain. Better oxygenation. Clearer thinking. Faster reaction time without the jittery overreaction that adrenaline causes. Relaxed muscles respond faster than tense muscles. When you're not locked in fear-driven rigidity, you can move fluidly in any direction. The Yoshioka ambush required constant redirection, deflecting one attacker while positioning against another. Rigidity would have been death. Maintained peripheral vision allowed Musashi to track multiple threats simultaneously. He could see the archer drawing his bow while engaging the swordsman in front of him. Most people under adrenaline would have locked onto one or the other. Historical accounts support this interpretation. Multiple descriptions of Musashi in combat mention his eyes, specifically that they looked at everything and nothing or seemed to see through opponents rather than at them. This is the visual signature of parasympathetic nervous system dominance. When you're calm, your eyes naturally maintain soft focus, wide peripheral awareness without hard fixation. When you're in sympathetic arousal, your eyes lock onto specific threats with intense focus. Musashi's gaze stayed soft, even surrounded by men trying to kill him. This wasn't superhuman. This was practice. Thousands of hours training his nervous system to interpret danger as neutral information rather than emotional trigger. Zen meditation likely played a role, as seated meditation trains exactly this skill, observing thoughts and sensations without reactive engagement, noticing fear arising without becoming fearful, watching the impulse to tense without tensing. Transfer that skill to combat, and you have Mushin, the mind that doesn't flinch. But the deepest insight is this: calm isn't a mental state you force. It's a biological baseline you protect. Your nervous system wants to be calm. That's its default. Panic is expensive, reserved for genuine emergencies. But most people inadvertently trigger emergency mode through tension, shallow breathing, and emotional reactivity. They fight their own biology, then wonder why they feel exhausted. Musashi stopped fighting his biology. He removed the triggers, maintained the breathing, that let his nervous system do what it was designed to do: process information efficiently without emotional distortion. The result looked like supernatural composure. In reality, it was just human physiology functioning without interference. Calm became his weapon, not because it made him peaceful, but because it made him efficient. While his opponents burned through energy in adrenaline-fueled chaos, Musashi moved with surgical precision, heart rate steady, vision clear, muscles relaxed. He didn't overcome fear. He engineered his nervous system to not generate it in the first place. And that engineering, combined with posture, breath, and efficient movement, created a body that could function under pressure for as long as needed. Not through willpower, through biology working as designed. Chapter 6. Proof under death. Theory means nothing without results. Musashi's methods were tested repeatedly under conditions where failure meant death. 3 moments proved the system worked. Ganryu Island, 1612. The duel with Sasaki Kojiro is Japan's most famous sword fight. But the popular version, 2 warriors meeting in honorable combat, misses what actually happened. Musashi manipulated the entire encounter before drawing a weapon. Kojiro arrived on time at the agreed location, a small island between Honshu and Kyushu. He waited. Musashi didn't appear. An hour passed, then 2. Kojiro's students watched their master pace the beach, grip tightening on his sword, jaw clenched, breathing accelerating. Emotional elevation. Exactly what Musashi intended. When Musashi finally arrived, hours late, Kojiro was furious. The records describe him shouting challenges, demanding explanation, already mid-adrenaline cascade before the fight began. Musashi stepped off the boat slowly, unhurried. He'd carved a crude wooden sword from an oar during the boat ride, a weapon longer than Kojiro's steel blade but heavier and less balanced. Witnesses noted Musashi's demeanor: relaxed shoulders, steady breathing, neutral expression. The physiological opposite of his opponent. Kojiro's body was already burning energy through rage and anticipation. Elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, tense muscles fighting themselves. Musashi's body remained at baseline, conserving everything. When Kojiro attacked, his famous swallows reversal technique, a strike so fast it seemed to come from 2 directions simultaneously. Musashi moved once, not a desperate block, not a wild counter. One economical overhead strike with the wooden oar, using gravity and rotation exactly as he'd trained. The oar connected with Kojiro's skull. He died shortly after. The fight lasted seconds, but it was won in the hours before, when Musashi controlled Kojiro's nervous system while maintaining his own. One man leaked energy through emotion. The other preserved it through calm. The difference was lethal. The Yoshioka ambush, 604. 8 years earlier, Musashi had faced a different test. Not one opponent, but dozens. The Yoshioka school wanted revenge for previous defeats. They abandoned dueling protocol and set an ambush. Swordsmen hidden in the trees, archers positioned on surrounding hillsides. A coordinated assault designed to overwhelm through numbers. When Musashi entered the trap, blades came from every direction. The eyewitness accounts, yes, there were observers who survived, described something unexpected. Musashi didn't fight frantically. He moved continuously but never hurried. No freezing in place. No wild spinning to track threats. Smooth weight transfers from one foot to the next. Sword moving in efficient arcs. Body angled to minimize exposure while maintaining awareness of all attackers. This is what efficient movement under pressure looks like. Not movie choreography with dramatic poses between strikes. Constant flow, minimal energy per action, no wasted motion. He used attackers as shields against other attackers. Positioned so arrows would risk hitting their own men. Created angles where opponents interfered with each other. This requires clear vision, peripheral awareness that adrenaline destroys. Musashi maintained it because his nervous system never escalated to panic. The young Yoshioka heir died in the encounter. Musashi escaped with minor wounds. Not because he was invincible, but because his body didn't sabotage itself with unnecessary tension and energy waste while facing superior numbers. Old age, 1645. Perhaps the most remarkable proof isn't dramatic. It's chronological. Musashi died in 1645 at approximately 62 years old. Not from battle wounds. From what historical records suggest was likely cancer, a disease unrelated to combat stress. 62 doesn't sound impressive now. In 17th century Japan, for a man who fought over 60 lethal duels, lived in poverty, slept on floors, walked thousands of miles, and spent decades in physical hardship, it was extraordinary. Most samurai died in their 30s. Combat injuries, infection, or sheer physical breakdown from stress. Musashi was still writing, painting, and training in the final months of his life. The famous text, The Book of Five Rings, was completed just weeks before his death, a work requiring mental clarity and sustained focus. His body hadn't degraded into premature aging. His nervous system hadn't collapsed from chronic stress. His joints hadn't destroyed themselves from decades of inefficient movement, because he'd never abused these systems in the first place. Every day of his life, Musashi moved efficiently, breathed fully, maintained postural alignment, kept his nervous system regulated. 62 years of compound efficiency. While others burned bright and died young, Musashi sustained himself through biological optimization. Musashi didn't survive because he was tougher. He survived because he was smarter. Not intellectually smart, biomechanically smart. His body wasted nothing. No energy leaked through chronic muscle tension. No oxygen wasted on shallow panic breathing. No movement inefficiency compounding into joint damage. No nervous system exhaustion from perpetual adrenaline. Every system optimized. Every action economical. That optimization created what looked like endless energy. In reality, it was just normal human energy not being squandered. This is the method. Stand with aligned spine so breathing works properly. Breathe diaphragmatically so your nervous system stays calm. Move using gravity and momentum instead of muscular force. Maintain emotional neutrality so adrenaline doesn't drain you. 4 interlocking systems: posture, breath, movement, mind. When these align, the weakness and sluggishness disappear. Not because you've built more energy, but because you've stopped hemorrhaging it. Musashi proved this works, not in theory, under lethal pressure, repeatedly, for decades. He never felt weak or sluggish because his body was a closed system, generating what it needed, conserving what it produced, wasting nothing. Not motivation keeping him going, not discipline forcing effort, not caffeine or rest or special diet. Body control, pure and simple. The human machine running as designed, without interference from tension, shallow breathing, inefficient movement, or emotional chaos. That's how you never feel weak or sluggish again. Not through superhuman effort. Through ordinary biology, finally allowed to function without fighting itself. Musashi discovered this 400 years ago. The question is, will you learn from it now?